The drainage pipe behind Habitat 7 had been leaking for 11 days. Owen Calloway knew this because he had submitted 3 maintenance requests, received 2 automated confirmations, and heard nothing after that. So on the morning that would later appear in 17 separate galactic incident reports, he was on his knees in the soil outside the botanical sector with a wrench in his hand, fixing it himself. The soil on Station Verdant was engineered soil. It smelled like nothing. Owen had never fully gotten used to that. Back home in northern Ontario, soil smelled like something alive. Here it just smelled like the absence of a smell. He had stopped complaining about it after the first year. There was no one to complain to who would understand what he meant. He had just gotten the pipe coupling loose when every alarm on the station went off at once, not just the soft chime that meant a pressure door had opened, not the medium tone that meant a delivery shuttle was coming in. Every alarm, the full emergency sequence layered on top of each other, loud enough that Owen felt it in his back teeth. He reached over to the local panel on a Habitat wall and switched off the ones he had access to. The noise dropped by half. He went back to the coupling. His handheld comms started lighting up. Thought he set it face down on the ground and finished loosening the coupling first because the position he was in was the right position, and if he moved now, he would lose it and have to start over. The pipe gasket was cracked, which was what he had suspected. He pulled it out, checked it, confirmed it, and reached into his kit for a replacement. Then he picked up the COM 14M calls, a station-wide text alert in large red lettering, and a voice message from Director Sin that was mostly just her saying his name at increasing volume that he called her back. She picked up before the first ring finished. Her voice was very high and very fast, which was how HFY sounded when they were frightened. Their vocal cords tightened. Owen had learned to recognize it. She said, "Owen, Owen, where are you right now?" He said, "Botanical Maintenance Sector 9 outer wall. I'm replacing a gasket on the." She said, "Rixis is out." Owen looked at the gasket in his hand. He set it down carefully so it would not roll into the mud. Out of the enclosure, out of the enclosure, out of the inner habitat, out of the secondary containment buffer. It bypassed all 3. We do not know how. The entire eastern wing is evacuated. Every team is pulling back. A pause. Her voice got tighter. "Owen, Sector 9 is adjacent to the eastern wing. I know where Sector 9 is. Have you seen anything?" Owen looked up from the pipe behind his tool shed, about 40 m away. Something very large was lying in the space between the shed wall and the habitat boundary fence. It had not been there when he arrived this morning. It was dark-scaled, longer than the shed itself, and its sides were rising and falling slowly. "There is a large animal asleep behind my shed," Owen said. Com went completely silent. He waited. Sen said very carefully, "Can you describe it?" "Big dark scales, looks like it's sleeping. I noticed it maybe 20 minutes ago, but I was dealing with the pipe." He squinted. "The markings on its back are doing that light-up thing, blue and green mostly." Slow pulse. Another silence, longer this time. Then Selen's voice came back, and it had gone very flat, which was what happened to HFY voices when they move past fear into something that did not have a name. "Owen, that is Rixis. You're currently in the same sector as a Class 9 apex hazard and you are still standing." "I'm kneeling." Actually, he picked the gasket back up. The pipe still needs finishing. Can someone bring me a size 4 coupling? While they're coming out, I only have a size 3 in my kit, and I think the fitting is wider than standard. The comm was quiet again for a long time. When Selin spoke again, she had clearly put him on speaker because her voice had that hollow echo that meant a room full of people was listening. Owen, I need you to step away from the tool shed and move toward the west corridor slowly. I'll come by when I'm done. Owen, it's asleep, he said. It's not bothering anything. The gasket is bothering something specifically. It is bothering the nutrient flow to the entire eastern botanical grid, which is why 6 of the luminescent hedge panels have gone dark. And you've been wondering about that for a week. He put the comm on the ground. Again, not face down this time, so she could hear him working, and fitted the replacement gasket into the coupling. Behind the shed, Rex's breath slowly in and out, its markings pulsing soft blue in the dim light of the stations. False morning. Owen tightened the coupling, checked the seal, and turned the line back on. He watched the pressure hold. Good. Picked up the comm. Gasket is done. What was the question? In the security hub, 17 alien staff members were staring at a single camera feed showing a human crouching next to a pipe while the galaxy's most dangerous living creature slept 10 m behind him. And 01 said anything, and one knew what to say. Warden Dreth had spent 19 years in galactic containment work. He had walked into enclosures with Shref acid spitters. He had supervised the relocation of a breeding pair of calls battle crabs, each one the size of a transport skiff. He had once stood in the same corridor as a loose-fin Rothi stalker for 40 seconds while his team got the door open, and he had not run. And he had been proud of that for the rest of his career. He was currently standing at the entry corridor to Sector 9, and he could not move his legs. This was not a choice. His legs simply were not cooperating. They had received the signal from his eyes, processed the image of Rixus standing at the far end of the sector with its full threat display blazing, and responded by locking every joint from the hip down. His body had made a decision. Without him, every member of his 6% containment squad had experienced the same thing. They stood in a row at the corridor entrance like pieces of furniture. Rixus was not charging. It was not making noise. It was simply standing between the corridor and Owen's shed with its markings running hot and bright, the full warning display. And that was enough. That was more than enough. Every nerve Drath had was screaming at him to back away and seal the door and flood the sector with sedative gas and deal with the paperwork. Later he could not even do that. His hands were not working either. Then Owen walked out from behind the shed. He was carrying a metal thermos and a folded piece of paper that turned out to be his afternoon task list. He looked at Rixus. He looked at the row of frozen alien security officers at the corridor end. He looked at Rixus again. They want you to stay there, he said in the direction of Dree's squad. Dreth managed to move his mouth. Get back, I'm finished. Owen sat down on an overturned crate near the shed wall. He opened his thermos. Steam came out. He looked at his task list. Rixus watched the corridor. Its marking stayed bright. Owen turned to look at it. You don't have to do that, he said, not to dress his squad to Rixus. Rixus did not lower its display, but it turned its head slightly toward Owen. There Not coming in, Owen said. He sounded the way he sounded when he was explaining to the junior maintenance staff that something was not actually complicated. It just looked complicated, you can see. They're not coming in, Rixis looked at the corridor, looked at Owen. The markings flickered, not off, but slightly less. Dreth watched this on the camera feed in addition to watching it with his own eyes, and he still did not believe it. Owen reached in his jacket pocket and took out a piece of root vegetable, dark orange, slightly fibrous, the kind he brought for lunch every day because it kept well and did not need heating. He held it out in Rixis's direction. Rixis looked at it, sniffed the air, then looked away. Suit yourself, Owen said, and ate it himself. I in the observation hub. Liaison Cora had arrived 3 minutes ago and had not moved since. She was the Lani, tall and pale-feathered, trained in diplomatic composure from the age of 8, and she was gripping the edge of the console with both hands because her body was also doing the thing where it refused to behave professionally. She had studied Vorkai for 6 years. She had read every interaction report ever filed in 3 years of captivity. Rixis had not permitted any living being within 20 m of its body. It had refused food delivered by remote arm. It had once shattered a reinforced wall when a maintenance drone passed too close. Owen was currently sitting approximately 2 meters away from it, reviewing what appeared to be a schedule for pruning the luminescent hedgerows in Section C. Sin's voice came through the conch. Can you explain what we are seeing? Cora thought about it. She was a trained diplomat. She chose her words carefully. No, she said. Dreth finally managed to move. He took 1 step backward, then another, until his shoulders hit the corridor wall. His squad did the same. Without being told, some of the paralysis released once they were no longer directly in Rix's sightline. He got his comm working, Calloway, he said. His voice was more stable than he expected. I need you to stand up slowly and walk toward the corridor. Owen turned a page on his task list. I'm in the middle of something. You are in the middle of an active containment situation. The hedge panels in Section C have been dark for a week because of the gasket I just fixed. Owen said once the nutrient line pressurizes, I need to check each panel individually for secondary blockage. That's 11 panels. I'd like to start before the end of shift. Dreth's mandibles clicked 3 times. It was an involuntary stress response. He was aware of it and could not stop it. Calloway. Dreth. A pause. It's right there, Dreth said. Owen looked up from his list. He looked at Rixis, which had settled back onto its hunches and was watching the corridor with slightly dim markings. Then he looked at Dreth. I know, he said. I can see it. He went back to his list. Rixis breath slowly in and out. The 11 head panels in Section C wait in the dark. Cora wrote 1 line in her report. It said, I do not think the human is aware that he should be afraid. She paused, then added, or perhaps he is simply not. The secure feed connected at noon, which was when Owen took his lunch break. Regardless of what was happening around him, he was sitting in the groundskeeper break room at the edge of Sector 9. Rixis had not followed him inside, but was visible through the narrow window, lying in the open ground near the shed. Selen and Cora appeared on the screen together, side by side. Sen looked like she had not slept. Cora looked like she was trying very hard to appear calm. Owen ate his second piece of root vegetable and waited for them to start. So Len said, "We need to understand what happened," Owen said. "With what specifically? With you?" "With Rixis, with how this started," Owen thought about it. "I first saw it watching me about 3 weeks ago through the habitat wall, the inner wall, the clear one." He took a drink from his thermos. "It would be there when I came in the morning watching the sector." Cora leaned forward slightly. 3 weeks, give or take. I didn't mark the exact date. It wasn't causing any problems. You noticed a Vorai watching you and did not report it. Sen said it was inside its habitat. "It was just looking." Owen set his thermos down. "I notice a lot of things I don't report. Most things work themselves out," Cora said carefully. "What else did you notice?" "It was losing scales along the top of the back. Patches of them, not a full shed. In my experience with large animals, that usually means stress or illness. I'm not a vet. I didn't want to make assumptions." He paused. "I figured the soil by the habitat wall was probably low in minerals since nothing had been planted there in a while. I left some of the amended soil I used for the hedge, pushed it close to the base of the wall." "You left mineral soil near its habitat?" Cora said it was gone the next morning. "Figured it went through the base gap. Those gaps are small." I checked. He looked at his task list. "Should have reported that the gap is a structural note. I'll write it up." Selin made a sound that was not quite a word. Cora was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Owen, I need to tell you something about Vorai. When they're in captivity, they decline. It is not a physical illness. It is something harder to treat. Their species evolved as solitary apex hunters. They're not meant to be watched. In the wild, of Vorai could go years without being seen by anything in an enclosure. They're observed constantly. Every sensor, every camera, every staff check." She paused. "There's a concept in their biology. We do not have a good word for it in common language, but the closest translation is the weight of being seen. Constant observation causes a chronic stress that compounds over time." Rixis had not eaten a full meal in 6 weeks before today. Owen was quiet today. Cora said it ate the first full feeding since the sensor logs show it began watching her sector. Owen looked out the window. Rixis was lying on its side now, one large eye half open. "I don't stare at it," Owen said. "About work to do." "Yes," Cora said. "That is exactly it. I just work near it." "You work near it the way you would work near a wall or a tree or anything else that simply exists in the space around you. You do not monitor it. You do not study it. You do not react to it." Cora's voice was very steady, but something behind it was not. "It came out to find you, Owen. It left the enclosure to follow the one being on the station. That has never once made it feel like a thing being observed." Owen was quiet for a while. Sen said, "We still have a containment situation." "I know," Owens said. "Rixis cannot simply live in Sector 9. Why not?" "Silence. It is a Class 9. I know what class it is. I'm asking why. That means it can't be where it wants to be if it is not hurting anything." Silence on the feed. Cora looked at Sen. Sen looked at Cora. Owen looked out the window again. Rixis had closed its eye. It trusted something. Owen said he did not say it like it was a profound statement. He said it the way he said most things, like he was just noting a fact that seemed relevant. It trusted the soil by the wall. It trusted the distance I kept. It came out here because this was the one place it was Not being watched, he picked up his thermos. Now there are 17 cameras on it, and everyone on the station is staring. At the feed, another silence that he looked at the screen. Can you turn off the non-essential cameras in the sector? Sen said we have a safety protocol. No, Owen said, but it's already awake and outside and sitting next to me. Voluntarily, the protocol is a bit late. Cora almost smiled. She caught it before it fully formed. I'll see what I can do, she said. Owen nodded. He finished lunch. Through the window, Rixis's chest rose and fell. One more question, Sen. Why are you not afraid of it? Owen thought about this for longer than he usually thought about things. I grew up in Northern Ontario, he said finally. There were things bigger than me in the woods from the time I could walk. You learn pretty fast that size doesn't mean danger. Usually it just means it's had a harder time than you. He closed the feed and went back to work. By the second morning, the station had started running out of excuses. 6 of the eastern wing supply corridors were still locked down. A food delivery drone had been rerouted 4 times because its path took it through Sector 9. 2 members of the botanical team had filed formal distress reports after being asked to continue their shifts in adjacent sectors, and both had declined, with language that Sen described in the incident log as emphatic. Owen had arrived at his usual time, nodded at Rixis the way a person nods at a neighbor they see every morning, and started checking the 11 hedge panels. Section C, 3 of them had secondary blockages as he had predicted. Dreth called a strategy meeting at 8. Owen was not invited, which suited Owen fine. He could hear parts of it through the open vent near the shed because the station's acoustic insulation was not as good as the engineering specs claimed. Dreth wanted to sedate Rixis from a distance. Use a long-range delivery system. Get it back in the enclosure, reinforce the enclosure walls, and write a report that ended with a word resolved. Cora said, no. She said it the way diplomats say no, which means she said it for 9 minutes and used a great many words, but the center of all of them was no. Vorai were a protected species under the 3rd Galactic Preservation Compact. Sedation of a protected species without documented consent from a treaty guardian required a panel review, species welfare assessment, and a 40-day comment period. Dreth asked who the treaty guardian was. There was a pause. There was no treaty guardian. The Vorkai civilization was gone. Rixis was the last one. The compact had been written assuming there would be more, and no one had updated it when there weren't. Owen, who had heard this through the vent while clearing blockage for panel 7, thought that was sad in a way he did not have good words for. He went back to the blockage. Selin contacted him at 10. Dreth wants you to attempt to guide Rixis back to the enclosure, she said. She sounded like she had practiced saying this in a way that suggested it was a normal sentence. Owen looked at Rixis, which was lying in the sun near the shed. The bioluminescent markings were doing slow calm cycles, blues and soft greens. Has anyone asked Rixis what it wants? Owen said. Sen was quiet. Enclosure, Owen said. What is it like? It is fully climate controlled, reinforced with automated feeding, and how big? 40 by 60. Owen looked around. Sector 9, open ground, the shed, the hedge beds, the outer habitat wall, the open sky panels above, letting in the artificial daylight, probably 200 meters In any direction, it's a box, Owen said. It is a secure with cameras on it. Constantly, Owen said, and feeding. Schedules and automated arms and walls. It can see. He cleared the blockage on. Panel 8, I wouldn't want to live there. Either, Sen said, Owen, there are no other options. The station is not designed to house a Class 9 freely. What if it wasn't free exactly? What if its range was just larger? Silence. My sector, Owen said, it's got a perimeter fence already. Outer habitat wall on 2 side. The access corridors have blast doors that have been shut since yesterday. Anyway, he stood up and looked around. It's basically already contained. It just has more room. You are proposing, Sen said slowly, that we officially designate a groundskeeping maintenance sector as a secondary habitat for the last surviving Vore in the galaxy. I'm proposing we write down what is already true, Owen said of a very long pause, and your role in this arrangement. Sen said, I keep doing my job. Sector 9 is my sector. I just also be in it. He moved to panel 9. It's not bothering me. I'm not bothering it. That seems like a workable situation. In a strategy room, Dreth had his head in his hands. Cora was writing something on her data pad. She was writing quickly, which was something diplomats only did when they had found an angle that worked. The compact, she said without looking up, does not specify that a treaty guardian must be an individual of the same species. It specifies that the guardian must demonstrate a consistent pattern of non-harmful interaction and a willingness to act in the interests of the protected creature's welfare. Dreth looked up. Owen has been doing that, Cora said, for at least 3 weeks before any of us knew about it. She kept writing. Dreth looked at the security feed. Owen was crouched in front of panel 9. Rixis had moved while no one was watching and was now lying approximately 3 m behind Owen, watching him work with one golden eye half open. Dreth watched for a while. Fine, he said finally, in the tone of a person surrendering to something they do not fully understand. He pulled up the formal reclassification form and stared at the blank field for a long time. In the field labeled proposed habitat guardian, he typed Owen Calloway Sector 9 Groundskeeper. He submitted it before he could think too hard about it. The Treaty Council took 11 hours. Cora sat in the communication hub through most of it. There was a senior council member who kept calling the proposal unprecedented, which was accurate. There was another who kept asking what the liability implications were if the human was injured, which Cora answered by pulling up the 3 years of incident reports in which Rixis had refused to interact with anyone and pointing out that this was a different situation and liability law had never accounted for the possibility of a human groundskeeper who simply did not register large predators as threats. That a third council member asked if Owen had consented to the role. Cora put Owen on the council member whose name was Elder Voss and who had held a treaty seat for 40 years and considered himself unshockable. Asked Owen if he understood what he was agreeing to. Owen said, I'd be responsible for Rix's welfare, make sure it's eating, report any health concerns, flag anything unusual. Basically the same as what I do for the hedge panels, except the hedge panels don't eat. Elder Voss said, you understand it is the last of its kind. Owen said yes, and that it has killed 11 beings across documented incident reports in other facilities. I read the file. Owen said all 11 were cases where someone entered its space without warning. That seems like a reasonable response to me. A pause from the council side. You are not concerned for your own safety. Elder Vos said, I'm more concerned about the secondary blockages in Section C. Owen said, 3 panels are still not at full output. The nutrient flow is at 60%. There was a long pause on the council line. Then Elder Vos said in a different tone, something that Cora recognized as the tone of someone who had just decided to stop arguing. Provisional approval. 90 days, review at 60. He disconnected. Cora put her head on the desk for approximately 4 seconds. Then she straightened up and called Owen. Provisional approval, she said. 90 days. Good. Owen said he was in the sector. She could hear the faint sound of tools. I'll clear the remaining panels this afternoon. Owen, this is significant. The council has never approved a cross-species habitat guardian arrangement outside of certified facilities. I know. Owen said, thank you for the work you did on it. I know it took a while. In the background of the call, Cora heard a sound low and resonant somewhere between a hum and a vibration. She had heard recordings of it in her research files. Is that Rick Sis? She said. Yes, Owen said. It does that sometimes when I'm working nearby. I think it's just comfortable. Cora sat with that for a moment. She had spent 6 years studying Vari. She knew their threat vocalizations, their aggression signals, their distress calls. The sound in the background of Owen's comm did not match any of those categories. She had never heard of Vorkai make it in any recording she had access to. She pulled up her research notes and added a line, possible contentment vocalization, unrecorded in captivity. Later that afternoon, Owen was moving a large soil compactor from the storage into the shed to the working area. It was heavy and the wheels had stuck. He was pushing hard and not making much progress. He was not aware that Rick Sis had stood up behind him until something very large and warm pressed against the side of the compactor, and it moved smoothly without effort in exactly the direction Owen was trying to push it. Owen stumbled forward a step, caught himself, looked to the side. Rick Sis was looking at him or past him. It was sometimes difficult to tell. Thank you, Owen said. Rick Sis made the low sound again, then it walked back to its spot near the shed wall and lay down. Owen parked the compactor where he wanted it. He stood there for a moment, looking at Rick Sis, which had already closed its eyes. He thought about what Cora had told him, the last one, the last of an entire species alive in a sector that smelled like engineered soil and machine oil, with one human who showed up every morning to check the hedge panels. He thought about the woods back home, about the way the large things moved through them, quiet, not looking for trouble, just existing in the space they were in, the way they had always existed in it. Before everything changed, he turned back to his work. That evening, as Owen was packing up his kit, Dreth came through the sector to do the final perimeter check before the blast doors were formally reassigned as habitat boundaries. He had to walk within 15 m of where Rick Sis was lying. That he walked faster than his usual pace, but he tried not to show it. He thought he mostly succeeded. Rick Sis opened one eye. Watch him pass. The markings did not activate. Not even a flicker. Dreth made it to the far corridor and did not look back. Owen, latching his kit, glanced over. It's not going to do anything, he Said, I know, Dreth said from a safe distance, not sounding like he knew it. Can tell the difference, Owen said. He shouldered his kid. It's been able to tell the difference this whole time. He walked out. Rixis watched him go. Then it settled its head back on the ground and closed its eyes. The blast doors sealed. The sector lights shifted to evening mode. The last Vorkai in the galaxy slept in the dark with the faint smell of soil and hedge nutrients around it, and did not dream of walls. 3 months after the incident, a journalist from the Galactic Record contacted Station Verdant requesting an interview with Owen Calloway, Habitat Guardian Sector 9, that she was the 11th journalist to request this. Owen had declined the previous 10. Sen had forwarded this one with a note that said simply, please, the council is getting calls. Owen agreed to 15 minutes. The journalist's name was Davy. She was Riani with 4 articulated fingers and a recording device she kept sitting on the table between them and then picking up again nervously. She had covered galactic incidents for 12 years and had interviewed heads of state and fleet commanders and the last surviving member of the Orth migration, and she was visibly unsure how to talk to a man who was eating lunch while he waited for her start. She asked her first question. How did you know you would be safe? Owen said, I didn't think about it in those terms. She asked, were you not afraid? He said, not particularly. She tried a different approach. Can you describe the moment you first realized Rixis had followed you out of the enclosure? Owen thought about this. I didn't know it had left the enclosure. I just noticed something large had settled behind the shed. I noted it and went back to the pipe I was fixing. Dobby looked at her recording device. You noted it? I filed in my head. I was going to look into it after the gasket. The drainage pipe had been leaking for 11 days. That was the more pressing issue. Dobby was quiet for a moment. Then she said, how is Rixis now? Owen looked out the window. Rixis was visible in the open ground, doing something Owen had started calling the afternoon circuit, which was when it walked the perimeter of the sector in a slow loop, not anxiously, just moving. It had started doing it on its own about 3 weeks in. Owen thought of it as exercise, eating well, he said. Scale loss stopped in the first month. The markings are brighter than the old enclosure footage. I looked that up. Cora says the stress indicators are down across all measurable points. He paused. It helped another staff member move a piece of equipment last week. Voluntarily, nobody asked it to. Davy wrote something, and your official title is Habitat Guardian. That's what the form says. I still do the grounds. Section C hedges are at full output now. I fixed the drainage issue on the western side last week. That one was a cracked mainline. Dobby looked at him for a long moment. Then she asked what Owen could tell was the question she had actually come to ask. Why do you think it chose you? He did not answer right away. He looked at his hands, which were the hands of a person who worked outside and fixed things. He thought about the woods back home. He thought about the first time he had come across a black bear in the early morning. Both of them surprised, both of them still. How they had looked at each other for a moment and then each gone their own way, and he had told his mother about it, and she had said, you just don't make a big thing of it, and usually they don't either. I think it was tired, Owen said, not sleepy, tired the other way, the kind That builds up when everything around you is either afraid of you or studying you or trying to manage you. He picked up his thermos. I wasn't doing any of that. I was just there working, not making a big thing of it. Davy wrote a full paragraph. One more question, she said. What do you want people to understand about Rixis? Owen considered. That it is not a hazard rating, he said. It is a thing that was alone for a very long time and then wasn't. That is most of what there is to understand. Davy thanked him. Owen nodded and went back to his afternoon. Dora's report was published 2 weeks later. It ran to 40 pages, dense with data and treaty analysis and xenopsychological notes. But the part that got quoted most often was near the end, a single paragraph that she had written last and almost caught. It said what Owen Calloway provided was not bravery in any conventional sense. He provided consistency, proximity without agenda, presence without performance, in the absence of fear and fascination both. Something that had been slowly dying began quietly to live again. Dreth read the report. He read that paragraph twice. He did not comment on it, but he printed it and put it somewhere in his office where it could not be seen from the door. In Sector 9, the evening shift ended. The lights moved to night mode. Owen packed up his kit. Rixis was in its usual place near the shed, settled and still. Owen said, same time tomorrow. Rixis made the low sound. Owen walked out. Blast door sealed behind him. The last Vorka in the galaxy closed its eyes in the dark, in a space that smelled like soil and work and a person who had never once looked at it like something to be afraid of, and slept the full night through without waking.